Hey there, thank you for tuning in to Vision, the show where we talk about the College of Arts and Sciences. I'm Lindsay Poe, your host, and on today's show we have Dr. Brandon Barton from the Department of Biological Sciences. Thank you so much for being on our show today.
Thank you for having me.
So you're here to talk about some really neat research, or at least I think I could say that. I think when people hear that it involves animals, it automatically sparks people's attention. So cool research that you have, but I want people to know a little bit about you first. And so can you talk about, where are you from? And you have a family here. How did you guys make your way to Starkville? How did that happen?
Yeah, it's a long, intertwined stories. I grew up in Idaho, we do research still in Idaho because of that. I moved to Florida. That's where I met my wife. We studied sea turtles in Florida. Talk about something that tends to get people's attention. I moved from there, did my PhD at Yale, where I started working with insects, and a lot of our work now is because of that insect work. Wisconsin after that, and then we moved down here in 2015, and we've been here ever since.
That's awesome. So you've been all over the place. What do you do here? I mean, you are a professor. What do you teach? Kind of what's your area? And then your main area of research has turned into insects, sort of, right?
Yeah, sort of, yeah. Okay. So I'm an ecologist, which means I'm interested in how animals and plants interact with their environment. And because of that, what we try to do in the department is make sure that people that are experts in their field are teaching classes relevant to their expertise. And so I teach mostly ecological classes. So I teach a class called Ecosystems right now, which is basically I describe it as planet Earth, in lecture form. So we just survey of all the cool things in the world. I teach a class called Community Ecology, and I also teach some upper division courses like biostatistics. Statistics are a really big part of what we do.
Right, really neat stuff. You have 3 different projects that we're going to touch on today. I mean, I'm sure we could talk about each one of them for an hour.
Sure.
But the first one was about noise pollution and lady beetles.
That's right.
Talk us through this.
Yeah. It's a funny story. I like that we're starting there because that was really the first big project in the lab. So in 2015, I got here. In 2016, I was trying to get students involved in my work, and I wasn't doing a very good job at it. And so I was trying to think about ways to get people, students, undergraduates, excited about, working in the lab. And so I was driving home one day, and in fact, I was right over here, not far from where we are now, the roundabout. And as I was going through the intersection, the radio started playing the song "Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution" by AC/DC, which was one of my favorite band, and I love AC/DC. I love the song, but I'd never thought about it quite the same way. And so that day, I realized rock and roll ain't noise pollution is a question we could test, scientifically. My lab does a lot with how humans are changing the environment, and noise is just another way we're changing the environment. Okay. And so I started coming up with this idea. I started telling students and putting my feelers out to get some undergraduates, and two young women ended up coming to kind of interview and join the lab, Anna Autry and Mariah Hodge. And I said, aren't you excited? We're going to study AC/DC. And they said, who's that? And so when I played it for them, both of them said, oh yeah, they play that during football games. Okay. And so if nothing else, college sports are at least maintaining a rock and roll education for these students.
And so what did you find out? I mean, what's the takeaway of this project?
Yeah. So, we could have played any sound, jackhammers, airplanes, whatever, to investigate sound pollution, but it's a lot more fun to do it with AC/DC. And so we played AC/DC at these ladybugs, and basically it stressed them out. We don't really know exactly what was going on, but they would eat less. And ladybugs, most people may not know this, but they're really important predators. They eat pests. And so in our crops, in our backyards, in our roses, we have aphids, and aphids are the main prey of these ladybugs. And so when we stressed them out with this sound, they ate fewer the ladybugs ate fewer aphids. You get more aphids. The aphids consume the plant, and we actually got reduced soybean yield because of AC/DC.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So important for farmers.
Well, it's important for our farmers and everybody, because even though it's a message about how noise pollution could affect crops, but it's also just a message about how what we do in the environment, whether it's changing temperature or precipitation or sound or light, it has effects that have effects that have effects. And that's largely what we work on.
And I mean, that sort of takes us maybe into your next project, between wolves and grasshoppers.
Yeah.
Can you talk about your trip? This was in Idaho.
Yep.
And you found some.
Yeah. Some wolf feces. We're on TV,
and
right?
you thought you would pick it up.
Well, it wasn't quite that simple, but so a lot of my work is with grasshoppers, and grasshoppers are a really important herbivore. They're actually a pest in a lot of places out west.
Okay.
And so we study how things in the environment, including predators, might affect grasshoppers and affect plants. Well, a lot of that work is inspired some of the work that's happened now out west in Yellowstone in particular with wolves and elk and aspen. Okay. And we've always had these two systems and known about them. But when we were walking down this trail, and this is in Idaho, we were a few ecologists out having a good time. I saw this scat and it was full of grasshoppers. I could see immediately. Not a lot of people in the world would recognize this, but I'm one of them. So I picked it up. It wasn't very fresh, so don't be too grossed out. But I brought it back to Jovan Hill, an entomology here, and Jovan dissected that scat out. 181 grasshoppers in one piece of scat. Yeah.
Wow.
And so what it showed is these two systems, these wolves and these elk, and these spiders and grasshoppers, they're not separate. They're actually interacting. Wolves are eating the grasshoppers and who knows what else.
And do you think that was that not known before you discovered this? And if it, I guess my question is, do you feel that the way we are changing the environment is changing what these animals are eating and what they can get and not get to, I guess?
Well, the second part of that answer is probably yes, we are doing things, but that really wasn't the main message here. So we did know that wolves occasionally might eat an insect, but documenting this level of insectivity and that they were targeting these things was really novel. And where humans come into play is, we extirpated the wolves. The wolves were gone from North America for most of the last century. Right. And it was only in the mid-90s, in fact, not far from where I'm home, that they were reintroduced into Idaho and Wyoming and Montana, in Yellowstone, that area. And so now, it's been 20, 30 years now, but we're still learning new things about the way wolves interact with their environment. Things we didn't know because we got rid of them all.
Wow. I feel like I'm sort of an expert because I now watch like 7 Worlds, 1 Planet or something on BBC, and it's all talking about all these questions about how we're changing the environment. And so I was really excited to ask you these questions today because it seems like it's so important in our culture today to know what we're doing. And I think talking about your feral pig experiment and sort of how it relates to the wildfires that happened in Australia is kind of, really important, right? And so moving to that next project, you most recently, right? So it's been your most recent project pretty much?
Yeah.
With some colleagues, you did a study involving rotting feral pigs and the surrounding environment and sort of how that has an effect on it. What sparked this idea and how did you get it all to work?
It was definitely a challenge. In 2015, some research came out that was documenting these mass mortality events, and not just they're happening, but they're happening more and more frequently. So not just an animal dying, not 10 animals, but hundreds, thousands. In fact, in 2016, 200,000 saiga antelope died in 1 month. This is in Kazakhstan. What's the impact of 200,000 antelope dying all at once? We have no idea. And so one way to investigate that would be to jump on a plane and try to go study it. That's really hard to do. And so we thought we'd create our own. In Mississippi and other places, we're killing feral pigs. They're a big conservation and agricultural threat. And so they're removing these carcasses, and we said, hey, we'll put them to use. And so we've been putting them out in different places. The most current experiment started last year in Oklahoma. We put out almost 15 tons of pigs. And me, my colleagues, graduate students are studying, what happens when all of these things die at once. There's this giant pulse of nutrients, microbes, the soil insects, everything changes.
And so I think I read an article you wrote for the conversation,
That's
sort of linking it to what was happening in Australia. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, that's right. So in Australia right now, over 1 billion animals, maybe even 1 trillion if you consider all the arthropods that are killed. But literally billions of animals died in just the last few months. And we don't know what the consequences of that are. And so we try to use what we've been doing to help them understand some of what to expect with this change in the environment and all these dead carcasses. Fires like what's happened in Australia are unprecedented. I mean, it's incredible. But unfortunately, probably the new norm. Things like that with climate change and other parts of environmental change are just happening more and more frequently. And so, our experiment wasn't designed exactly for that purpose, but we were able to use what we know from our experiments in Mississippi and Oklahoma to help inform what's going on there.
And what could you tell them?
Well, losing carcasses, losing animals, first of all, means you're losing functional roles. Those are animals that are no longer eating. Those are animals that are no longer doing what they're supposed to be doing. And it's not just one, but it's hundreds and thousands and millions of them gone, right? And so that can have effects. But at the same time, the body, these carcasses, are leaching all of these chemicals in the soil. We produced effects like dead trees. Like, we literally killed trees in Mississippi because there was so much toxic, slurry coming out of these animals. And so when you have those two things kind of combine, the death, the loss of the functional role, all of this, chemicals, bacteria leaching in, it restructures the soil in a lot of ways, wipes the slate clean.
Wow.
And now what we're still studying is what happens next, what comes back to recolonize that.
Right. And I bet it took a lot of work to get all of that to come together. Can you speak on that a little bit?
It was one of the worst and most satisfying experience in my life. I remember when Marcus Lashley, who was a professor here at the time, when we got the last thing set up, after a day, and this is July 5th, in Mississippi, hot, humid, insects everywhere, and we're dragging these carcasses through the swamps. It was terrible. And we got the last one on the ground, and I think we hugged each other and said, we'll never do that again.
Yeah.
We've done it 3 times since.
No, okay.
Because it's really interesting and it's important work, but it is
important work.
It's
a big
smelly
deal.
and hard,
especially in Mississippi during the summer. Okay, we've only got about 45 seconds left, so. Anything you are working on, any interesting projects coming up that might be a little bit different than what we've talked about today?
Yeah, I mean, nothing's too different, but really a kind of mixes of all of these things have come together in different ways. We currently have a project funded by the USDA to try to investigate a way of making a sound weapon. So we're calling it sonic weaponry. Can we use sound to actually control these grasshopper pests? Okay. And so right now, if you come by the lab, we're playing very, very annoying sounds at grasshoppers and then measuring their respiration rates to see if we can figure out which ones stress them out and which ones don't.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on Vision today.
Thank you.
It was really interesting stuff. We'll see you next time.